This week's Torah portion, which is called Torah reading, which is called Mishpatim, has in the 53 commandments. Most of them are commandments about damages. But there's also other assorted commandments here. This week, I think we're going to do something which we only did a little bit before. Instead of looking at the commentaries, let's look at the final laws that are involved here. Like I said, there's this book which is called Mitzvot Hashem, the commandments of God. I'm going to have to figure out exactly how to do this because I don't know when I press certain buttons on this program that sometimes the second page doesn't come up and sometimes it does come up. What exactly the principle is involved, I don't know. So let's just see what we can do here. All right, first of all, I'll just read what's written in this week's Torah portion. And we'll do a little bit of commentary in the beginning, but we'll do the first day of the first reading. There's 7 readings here. Each Torah reading is divided into 7 portions. So here's the first portion. Okay, if you remember, first of all, last week we finished, we didn't learn all of last week's Torah portion. We just learned what was really relevant to the 10 commandments. But the last commandment in last week's Torah portion was the commandment of the altar. It says you're not allowed to make a stairs going up to the altar. It has to be a ramp that goes up to the altar. A commandment. In the altar, in the holy temple, where they used to burn the sacrifices, it was a big, it's called the outer altar. There was an inside altar, which was in the holy. That was made of gold. It was small. They burned incense on it. And on then there was the big altar, which was called the copper altar on the outside, and the choshet. And that was much, much larger. And it was not in this section which was called the holy, which is right in front of the Holy of Holies. It was in what's called the courtyard, sort of. It was in the yard. And it was visible to everybody. And there's a commandment not to make that was high. It was high. It was, I don't know, like 10 yards high. And it was a commandment not to build steps going up to it. It had to be built a ramp. And also it couldn't be built by hewing the stones. In any case, it's a commandment about the altar. And then this begins this week's Torah portion. These are the laws you should put before them. What are the laws you should put? We're going to go back. What are the laws you should put? We learned about this in Chassidut in the morning, but we didn't learn about the legal aspects so much. When you buy a Jewish servant, he should serve for 6 years. No more than 6 years. And on the 7th year, he goes out free. You have to set him free. So when you buy him, you have to know you're only going to buy him for a maximum of 7 years. Really, until the Shemitah year comes. But you only buy him for 6 years maximum. If he came in unmarried, so he goes out unmarried. If when he came in he was married, then his wife goes out with him, and he explains what it means that you don't have to pay, you don't have to support his wife anymore. The person, when he sells himself to be a servant, or if the court sells him. There's two ways you can be a Jewish servant. Either the person becomes poor and he has debt, so he sells himself, or the other way is if he's caught stealing money and he can't make reparations, so the court can sell him. In any case, if when he went in to be a servant, he was married, so the new owner that he has to provide for his wife also. I don't know if you ten lo isha, but if his new master gives him a wife, and she has children, what type of a wife is this? There's other types of, there are basically four types of servants. There's two types of Jewish servants, male or female, and there's two types of non-Jewish servants called an Evet Kanani or Shifra Kananit, male and female non-Jewish. The non-Jewish servants are the possession of the owner. And you can give the non-Jewish, this law doesn't exist anymore, but a non-Jewish woman servant, when she is bought to be a servant, she becomes sort of like a Jew. And you can give, not 100%, but you can give her to a married Jewish servant, and the children now don't belong to the servant. The children are like the property of the owner. So in other words, a Jewish man either sells himself or gets sold by the court into slavery. If he had a wife when he went in, then the owner can give him a non-Jewish maidservant to have children with. But those children and the wife don't belong to the servant, they belong to the master. And then he goes out and he leaves them behind. But if he says, if he says, I love my master and my non-Jewish wife and my children, and I don't want to go out. So it says that his master takes him to a door, any door, or to the mezuzah. We'll see what this means. We're going to learn the laws. And he takes a metal thing, makes a hole in his ear, in the top part of his ear, with this, and then he serves him forever. Forever doesn't mean forever. It means until the Jubilee year, till the 50th year, and then he goes out. Next law. If a man sells his daughter to be a maidservant, he can sell her, a man can sell his daughter to be a maidservant, of course, only to a Jew. The master cannot have any sexual relations with her. She becomes a household servant, but only for a minimum also of 6 years. She doesn't go out katsesa avadim. She doesn't go out like the non-Jewish slaves. Now, a non-Jewish slave, he can go out if the master hits him and knocks out a tooth or harms one of his limbs. We'll see what the law is. And then a non-Jewish servant goes out in those cases. She does not go out. A woman servant, a girl, first of all, she has to be young when she's served. It has to be that she's below puberty. As soon as she reaches puberty, or there's three things. Either she reaches puberty, or somebody gets money and redeems her. In other words, let's say her father sells her into slavery for, let's say, $600 for 6 years. If she can get up the money, or someone gets the money and redeems her, so she goes free. She goes free. Let's say she only served for 1 year, so that she still owes $500. That's one way. Another way is if she if she served for 6 years, if the Jubilee year comes along, or if she serves for 6 years, then she she goes out. And there's a third way that a Jewish woman servant goes out. Right? It has to be a girl. Either serves for 6 years or she reaches puberty. She has signs of puberty. Then she goes out. Or there's another way is that the new owner can take her for a wife. He can marry her. That's called yud. But if there's something wrong with her, now you have to realize that back then in those times, it was a very big, very good thing for a woman to be married, a very not good thing for a woman not to be married. Of course, the husband had to, we'll see, he has to provide for his wife. But it was a not good thing to be married, and there weren't as many husbands as to provide for all the women. So a man could get married to more than one wife. And also here, this case, this young girl, her father sells her in to be a servant. The master, of course, has to treat her very well. If he can't misuse her. And he can also marry her or marry to his son. That's called yud. He can give her off to her son. Of course, if she wants to. If the master doesn't like her and he doesn't marry her or give her to his son to be married, then he can't sell her to anybody else. He can give her to her son, but if not, then if he can give her to her son, but he can't sell her to anyone else. She has to go free. If he does decide to marry her or his son marries her, then he has to provide her with she'ira ksuta v'onata lo yigra. He has to provide her with marital, with food and lodging, garments, and also her sexual relationships, at least once a month. Can't. If he doesn't do any of these three things, namely, she goes out with either she goes out with her with the age or with puberty, or he marries her to himself or to his son, or there comes along the 6 years or the jubilee, and she goes out with free. New law: a person who smites someone else and dies, that person will be put to death. Of course, there has to be witnesses, there has to be proper warning, but nevertheless, that's the main law. If a person did not hunt anyone, he killed someone accidentally, God just caused it to come. Like, for instance, the person is chopping wood and the head flies off, happens to accidentally fly off and hit somebody. If it was because of negligence, then God said, I put you a city of refuge to run there. And this is elucidated in other places, but there's a city of refuge. But if a person plans to kill his friend, premeditated, then you can even take him, if he's a Kohen, you can take him from the altar and kill him. A person who hits his father or his mother is punishable by death, even though it's a blow that does not kill them, and a kid's not capable of killing them, but it's a blow that will make a wound. Then a person hitting his mother and father, punishable by death. Again, the person has to have warning, has to have two witnesses, he has to agree to the warning and is to be aware that he was warned and immediately do the sin. What if a person he steals a person, kidnaps someone and sells him? What does it mean, sells him? That he's got witnesses that saw him steal someone, motimot. This is a commandment also in the 10 Commandments, but there it doesn't say what the punishment is. Here he says you will die, be killed. A person who curses his mother or father, makalel aviv v'imo, a person who curses his parents, he will die. The punishment is the stoning. Now here also it elucidates there's 4 different types of death for the different crimes. Spiritually they make sense, but physically they don't make any sense at all. Why there has to be 4 different types of death. One of them is stoning, and namely a person is pushed off of a high place with a stone on his chest. He pushed off of a high place. Another one is choking. The 2 people wrap a rope around the person's neck and pull in opposite directions. Another one is burning. The same thing as choking, but somebody holds the person's mouth open and they pour hot lead down. Pretty severe. And the 4th one is beheading, taking simply a sword and beheading the person. The punishment is not which type of punishment, not up to the judge. Certain crimes get certain punishments. How this is, that's in the Gemara and Sanhedrin explains it. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin explains exactly what are these different types of death, and it's all in order to purify the person spiritually. Again, I want to stress over and over again, which I don't know why I have to stress it, but that's the fact, that it was almost impossible to kill someone. And it says in the Mishnah, right near the end of Makot, that Rabbi Akiva said, if I was in the court, nobody would ever get killed. And it says that a court that killed a person once every 7 years, some people even 70 years, that was called a destructive court. Beit Din Chablanit. So it was a destructive court. So it was almost impossible. You had to have exactly witnesses, and they had to tell the person had to immediately carry out the crime immediately after he was warned and agree. I understand this. I hear the warning. I don't care. So that's when he gets killed. This is by skila, by stoning, being stoned to death. What if 2 people fight and one person hits the other one with a stone or with his fist, and he doesn't die, but he is fallen to, is injured, severely injured. If the person can go out on his crutch and the wound is healed, then you have to give them the one who did the damages has to pay for his time lost at work, and also he has to pay for his healing. Of course, the person has to be guilty. It wasn't self-defense, but nevertheless, that's the law. And that is the end of today's Torah reading. Let's just read the beginning, and then we're going to go to this book, which is called Mitzvot Hashem. Here we go. Let's go to the very beginning. See how much we can get done here. These are the laws you should put before them. Says Rashi. These are the laws. Any place where it says these are, this negates, erases everything that comes before it. Anytime it says and these, ve'ele, this adds on to what came before. What came before it? 10 Commandments. This adds on just the same way that the 10 Commandments were from Mount Sinai. Also, these commandments are also from Mount Sinai. Don't say that in Mount Sinai they only got the 10 Commandments, and that's it. Moses made up the rest of it. Not so. All of the commandments, all these commandments come from Mount Sinai. The fact of the matter is a lot of these commandments were said before Sinai also. It says that at Mara, there were 10 commandments that were given there also, but they were all repeated. Everything was repeated at Mount Sinai. At Mara was just giving them a preview. Okay, now, like I said before, Lama Nismacha Parshas Dinim LaParshas Mizbeach. Why is it that all these laws come right after the law I told you about? That's how we started the class off. That was mentioned in the end of last week's Torah portion about building the altar. Lomar to tell you, Shetasim Sanhedrin, that you have to put the judicial court, the big Sanhedrin with 71 members, Eitzel Mikdash, it has to be in the Holy Temple. That's where it was. In the outer portion of the Holy Temple, but that was where the great court was. Asher Tasim Lifnayim, these are the laws you have to put before them. God said to Moshe, Al Ta'al Dadcha, don't think that you might be able to say, Eshenelem Aperik, Allah Besu Gimel Pamim, I'll teach them the law twice or three times. Until everybody learns it by heart. And I don't have to explain to them the reasons for everything, and exactly what they mean. Just that everybody should know what the words are. Says God to Moses, don't think so, don't do it. That's why it says Tasim Lifneim. You have to put it before them, Kashulchan Aruch. You have to set it in front of like a set table. It's like somebody comes into a restaurant and they give him a raw steak, and they give him a fire, and they give him raw vegetables, and they say, get to work. Here is all the right. After we finish doing the job, this is what you're going to get anyway. You just have to do it. Same thing with the law. Moses just gives them all the ingredients, all the words, and says, get to work, trying to understand it. No, Moses had to explain it all to them. Now, the fact is, there are a lot of laws which Moses was not supposed to explain to everybody. There were a lot of laws that he did. There were a lot of laws that the rabbis had to learn. They had to learn by different methods of learning the Torah. All the methods were revealed to Moses, how to learn them. But there are some things that weren't learned, that were just given to Moses. For instance, tefillin, what exactly the size are. It's called halacha lamosyut misinai. What is the size and the appearance of tefillin? What has to be written in tefillin? It doesn't say clearly in the Torah. It just says it has to be a sign between your eyes. It says a sign on your arm, and whatever it is, a totafot, whatever, between your eyes. It's not very clear at all. So Moses explained the reasons to everybody. In fact, if you look at the Torah, you'll see that nothing is clear. The Torah is very, very complicated, very, very exact. And if you look at it, you can't understand, can't figure out why. We've talked about this a lot of times. Even the commandments, simple commandments like don't kill. It doesn't say don't kill people for no reason at all, right? It doesn't say don't kill what? Maybe it means don't kill animals. Maybe it means don't kill bacteria. Maybe it's, there's these Eastern religions, that that's what they say. It's forbidden to kill anything. Maybe that's what God was talking about. Maybe it means that even if somebody's coming to kill you, you shouldn't kill them. If so, how can there be all these death punishments afterwards? You should take him to kill him. What's that? So obviously there are times when you can kill. There's death punishments. So therefore the rabbis had to explain it. You put this laws lifnei. That's one meaning. You should put before them. In other words, Moses explained as much as possible to the Jewish people what the laws are. It's not just enough that they know it, what know the wording. They have to know the meaning. Lifneim, put it in front of them. V'lo lifnei ovdika elilim, and not take. You have to take your Jewish people have to take their cases in front of Jewish judges. Bafilu yudat v'din echad. Even if you know that one particular law, shu danim oto kadin Yisrael, that you judge it according to Jewish law. Al tevinu barchos shalem. Don't take it to the courts of the non-Jews. Shamevi din Yisrael, that a person that takes the law in front of the non-Jews, mechal as Hashem, he disgraces God's name, and he increases the name of the idols, the idolaters. Like it says, Kilot Katsurein Tzuram, Wavenu Palilim. It says that our God is not like their God, and our judgments are not like their judgments. It says if our enemies become judges, this is testimony to praise their gods that they worship. They worship the sun, the moon, people, whatever. So non-Jews can be very talented, and they can be very just, and they can also be, and sometimes you can get Jewish judges that are not That's why the temple was destroyed, first temple, second to the temple. But nevertheless, you should always try to take it to Jewish judges. Big problem, but that's the world is a big problem. What can you do? Here we go. Maybe a little bit of the Orach Chaim. I'm sort of doing what I didn't want to do, is going into the explanations, but there's so many beautiful explanations here. Here, this is the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, Rabbi Chaim Ben Attar. Maybe he's coming to explain the commandments. Says you should put them before them. What does it mean? Even though that this law, okay, what law are we talking about? We're talking about the law of the Jewish servant. That's how it starts off, with a Jewish servant, right? It starts off with the law of Jewish servant. So it says, you might think that this law is a big loss to everybody. First of all, the servant, for sure. He loses 6 years of his life. Nevertheless, you should put these words in front of them. In other words, make it appealing. Because this really, the commandment of the Jewish servant, this is merit for everybody. First of all, a Jew knows that if he does become a servant, he's not going to become a servant forever. A Jewish person is not meant to be a servant to anyone except for God. So therefore, if he does become a servant, so he has to know, don't worry, it's not your nature, it's just a temporary thing. You're only going to be a servant maximum 6 years, because everyone can say it, it's all to his merit, because the servant that's sold, call Ivri a Nimkar, because a Jew that it's sold to anyone, it's only because it's an unusual situation. He's got big debts, or he fell into being a criminal, he stole things, and the court sold him, right? Either he had big debts and he sold himself, or he stole and the court sold him. And this is a result of his poverty. So, ba'oto matzav kulam ashirim hayu ve'en ze'ela l'davra mitgalgel, because really a Jew is not supposed to be poor. This is just an unusual, weird situation. Therefore, everyone can put it in front of him that it's God's kindness that if God wanted to, he could arrange it that I would also be poor, God for shalom, and I would have to sell myself. So therefore, everyone will appreciate more what he has. Here's the Kli Yakar. Here it says, why was the holy temple the place where the court was? Why? Because that's the whole idea. It says the judges are not allowed to take shochad. It says the word shochad comes from the word chad. Where did he say this? Chad means to be sharp. It says sword, the sword, in other words, war comes to the world because justice is not served properly, and that the judgments are how do you say, they're bribed. Therefore, the money, there it is, the money is chad, it becomes sharp like a sword, and it cuts just like a sword cuts. A shochad. Shochad means bribery. It means shechad, that it is sharp. That's the reason why they put the Sanhedrin right next to the Mizbech. Okay, this is very interesting. Here he explains that on King Solomon's throne, there were 6 steps, and on each step there was written something. On each step was written another saying, and he explains what these are, but we can't really go into it. I just want to go into the mitzvot Hashem that we said before. But that's the reason why, is because the judgment is, these judgments are relevant to life itself. And if the Holy Temple was destroyed because the judgments weren't proper. Okay, let us go. 1 second. Let's see if I can do this. I hope this will work. Here we go. Share it again. There it is. I'm sure it came up this time. Okay, here we go. This is the book called Mitzvot Hashem. Well, no, it's not here, huh? Oh, I don't see it. Anyway, that's what it's called, Mitzvot Hashem. The book is called Mitzvot Hashem. And here is, this happens to be from the Chabad library. Took it. Whoever had this, here's the book, Mitzvot Hashem. It's by a fellow called Halpern. Before I said it was by Baruch Bencher, but it's a person called Halpern. All right. So we'll have to do this quickly also, but just to show you how wondrously intricate the law is. It's like a human being, it's very, living things are very intricate. Here we have Parshas Mishpatim. This week's Torah portion. Yes. The law of the Eved Ivri, the law of the Jewish servant. Like it says, Ki tikne Eved Ivri. Oh, just one moment. Ki tikne Eved Ivri. A court that sells a Jew against his will because he was a thief and he can't pay back, he has to serve 6 years from the time that he was sold. And in the beginning of his 7th year, he goes out to be free. Even if the Shemitah year was one of these 6 years, doesn't make any difference. He works on the Shemitah year as well. Like it says, 6 years you should work, and the 7th year he goes out. But if the Jubilee year, if the 50th year, which that's after 7 Shemitah years, 7 sabbatical years, 49 years, the 50th year is also like a sabbatical year, but that's called an additional name. It's called a Yovel. It's called the Jubilee year. If that comes within the 6 years, then he goes out free. Even if he was sold 1 year before the Jubilee year, he goes out to freedom. What about a person that sells himself? What about a person that's so poor that he sells himself? He hasn't got what to eat. He can't provide for his family, or if he's not married, he can't provide just for himself. If he hasn't got anything left to sell, because if he's got anything that he can sell and make money from it, he can't sell himself, then he can sell himself, and he can sell himself for as long as he wants, even for 20 years. But if the Jubilee year comes even after 1 year, he also goes out for free. So obviously, whoever buys him will take that into account. Any Jewish servant, if he gets the money and he can pay off the time, let's say, for instance, he sells himself for 6 years for $600 and he serves for 1 year, if he can get up $500, then he goes out for free. All right, other laws also involved in this. What happens if his master dies? What if the master just decides to free him? Nevertheless, it doesn't make any difference. He's not free. Does not go free. He doesn't. He has to serve to the end of the 6 years, even if the master wants to let him go, unless the master writes him a bill of freedom. Then he can go out. What if the master dies? So he goes, he's the master's property, he goes over to his son until the 6 years is finished. Or if he sold himself for the number of years that he sold himself for, which is maximum 50 years, 49 years. Or until he pays the amount of money he sold himself for 20 years, for let's say for $20,000. So he served for 5 years, so it's $15,000. If he can get up the money, then he goes free. But if a person sold himself and the master dies, then that ends his servitude. He doesn't, unless he has a male son, he doesn't, he'll go to free, he doesn't serve the daughter of the master. What if a person sells himself to a convert? Of course, this convert has children that are not Jewish. Or even if he does convert, and his children also do, but his children aren't considered to be really his. He's like somebody that's born brand new. So if a man sells himself to a convert and then the convert dies, then he goes free. A Jewish servant, the master has to provide his wife if he's married. He has to provide for the servant's wife as well, and his children and his daughters. And they don't receive anything from the wife or the daughters. If they work, they don't have to repay anything. If he sells himself and he has a wife and children, then the master has to provide for him and his wife and his children. But if the court sold him and he had a wife and children, then and a wife and children, then the court can give him a non-Jewish woman servant to have children with them. What if the court sells him and he doesn't want to go out at the end of 6 years? Then then the Beit Din takes him to a door or to a mezuzah, which is near the door, and they make a hole in his ear, in the ear, and they say, okay, you're going to serve him until either comes the Jubilee year or until your master dies, you go free. Then he doesn't serve the son. Okay, many more interesting laws. Let's just go on to the next law. Details. Second law. Okay, these laws, included in this law of the Jewish servant is also the Jewish maid servant. If the father wants to sell the daughter, what if a father sells his daughter to be a servant? The master can, if he wants to, marry that girl or give her to his son to marry. But if he doesn't do that, then he has to release her. Now, it was a mitzvah, a good thing, to marry this Jewish girl that was given to him as a maidservant, to marry her. But if not, then she goes free. But if she wants to, she can give money and free herself. Right? Like I said, if her father sells her, let's say for 4 years for $400, she served for 1 year, so she can give $300 to get the money up, and then she goes free. Next commandment. If he does not want this Jewish maidservant, 1 second, where are we now? If he does not marry the maidservant, doesn't give it to her son, then he cannot sell her to anyone else. He has to wait until either 6 years are filled or she shows signs of puberty, then she goes automatically free. A man that gets married, another law. A man that gets married, this is a negative commandment. A man that gets married cannot withhold from his wife garments, her livelihood, providing for her a house and food, garments, and marital relationships from his wife. Also from a Ama Ivriya, if he decides to marry his Jewish maidservant, he can't, like it says, She'ira ksuta ve'onata lo yigra. From here, we learn that a man, when he gets married to a woman, he has to give what's called a ketuva. He has to give a marriage document where he promises to provide for her all of these aforementioned things. Another command, negative commandment. We'll have to go a bit quickly here. A man is not allowed, lo lahakot aven, you're not allowed to smite your mother and father. This refers to a woman or a man cannot hit her mother and father. And if he does, she does, it's punishable by death. Now, every commandment that's punishable in the Torah, it has to say, first of all, the commandment, the prohibition, and then it also has to say also the punishment. It says the punishment over here is that you're not allowed to smite anyone, hit anyone, any Jew unnecessarily. If you make a wound in your mother or father, and there are witnesses, and there is a warning, then the punishable is death, which is punishable by choking. Choking, which we said one person, they wrap a rope around the person's neck, and two people pull on opposite ends. Also, same thing is if he hits his father or mother on the ear and causes a loss of hearing, also the punishment is death. Now, of these things, a lot of times the punishment does not exactly fit the crime, right? Doesn't exactly fit the crime. But we have to understand that this is God that's talking, and God gives us everything for free. So God is telling us, a person that smites his father in such a way and makes a wound, so that's bad. What if a father says, listen, do bloodletting, right? The father says there's a leech or something, pop this this boil that I have, don't do it. Give it to somebody else. You're not allowed to make a wound on your father. What if there is no other doctor except for you, and you have to heal your father? So then it's permissible to do. What if your father is guilty and his punishment is to be beaten? And it happens to be that I work for the court. That's my job, is to beat people. There's lashes. Sometimes crimes have lashes, right? So what to do? Don't do it. Find somebody else. Find somebody else. It's not allowed to hit your father. Next, positive commandment: a Beit Din should judge people who are guilty, who are punishable by, whose crime is punishable by choking, like it says, mot yumat. Right? There are 6 crimes which are punishable by choking. Someone has relations with a married woman, someone who kidnaps, someone who makes a wound in his mother and father, which we just finished, a zakin mamre, a wise man, one of the judges that purposely goes against the rest of the court, and a false prophet. A false prophet is punishable by choking, choking to death. Also, one who prophesizes in the name of idolatry, right? Prophesizes in the name of the sun and the moon, whatever. Explains how they would do it. They would sink the person up to his knees in mud so he couldn't move, and then they would put a cloth around his neck. Two people would pull one addition. One, the court also should judge people if one damages someone else, one who smites someone else, right? If he did it with malice aforethought, if he did it in self-defense, whatever is done to him, whatever he does to the other person should be done to you. So it says a person, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? And it says it doesn't mean that you take out the person's eye. That's not what it means. It never did mean that. It means you have to give the value of the eye. Like you did, the way I damage someone else is that amount of value I have to give in money. It's not that if I take out somebody's eye, they take out my eye. That is an invention of the enemies of Judaism. And that's all the commandments there are in this week's Torah portion. Today. For today. That's how many others? Something like 10 of the 52 we just finished learning. Have a good day with Mashiach now. God willing, tomorrow, 8:15, we continue learning Torah Or.